This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to a Wednesday edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily, March 8th, 2023. Happy birthday to WST. Hard to believe. 2 years to the day since we fired up our first episode. We had episode 500 on Monday, and now the milestones continue. 502 today. Obviously, this entire operation could not have gone much better, but a huge thank you right off the bat to everyone that makes Winnipeg Sports Talk a part of their routine, whether they're listening on the podcast or joining us live on YouTube. And a massive thanks to the sponsors that have been with us. I mean, the Nick and Nicky DQ, Royal Sports, Boston Pizza, Not AutoCorp, right from day one. And, of course, Manitoba Battery, F Apparel, Consolidated Supply, Wallace & Wallace, Vita Health Fresh Market, Culligan Water, Canadian Club, Little Brown Jug, and our partners over at Coolbet, and, of course, the wonderful people at Princess Auto. A hearty thank you from us at Winnipeg Sports Talk for your continued support. We won't spend a lot of time talking about the last 2 years because we got a big, big game tonight at Canada Life Centre. Scoreboard watching was not fun last night. Even less fun when I got by the ESPN scoreboard that told me that the Minnesota Wild had in fact won in extra time. Not so fast. Jared Spurgeon's OT winner overruled on, you guessed it, the offside challenge. And I believe it was Tyler Toffoli who had the winner in the shootout. And the Calgary Flames win 1-0 against the Wild, who we'll see tonight, and move to within 4 points of the Winnipeg Jets. Now, the Jets do have a game in hand. That game is going to be played tonight against the team that the Flames beat, the Minnesota Wild, a team that has had their way with Winnipeg through 2 matchups so far this season. So the stakes are high. The setting is tonight, 7 p.m. downtown. Massive game for the Winnipeg Jets, and we're going to be all over it today. Trevor Kidd's going to jump on in a few minutes with us. Trevor's been doing such a great job with the CGOB broadcast as well as the Jets post-game with Sarah Orlesky. Really looking forward to getting Trevor's take on where this team is at, what's been missing for the last month or two, and his thoughts on whether they can get it together and meet the challenge of a Wild team that has certainly raised their game over the last number of tilts. We'll also dive into Nikolaj Ehlers with Murat. Now, many of you who are athletic subscribers have already seen Murat's great deep dive into Nikolaj Ehlers' season, his usage, what's been going well for Nick, what hasn't. A really great read. We'll talk about that and obviously get Murat's take on this game tonight and the upcoming road trip that'll see the Jets play in Florida on Saturday, Tampa on Sunday, and then finishing off the road trip early next week against the Carolina Hurricanes before coming back home to meet the Boston Bruins at Canada Life Centre, the #1 team in the National Hockey League. And hey, it is International Women's Day. Shout out to all the women that take in Winnipeg Sports Talk every day, make this a much better place. Of course, all the women in all of our lives, and one of our favorite females, even if she's a wild person. Jessi Pierce from Bar Down Buttes and NHL.com is going to join us as well a little bit later on. So the table is set. Let's get at it, and let's get Michael Remis in here to get this show on the road. Remo, happy anniversary.
Yeah, happy anniversary. Hard to believe it's been 2 years. People are texting me. You know, you put out a very nice graphic like, whoa, has it been 2 years already? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, whoa, it's really flown by, but I'm thankful every day that we could do this, that people tune in and show. We had one of our most downloaded shows or downloaded days yesterday. I guess after the deadline and even after a loss, one of our most downloaded the last 90 days. We had one of our top shows ever with the trade deadline Friday, which was so much fun, even if there weren't any major deals to talk about. So I'm so thankful to be doing this every day. Thankful to the sponsors, people in chat, people on podcast, the guests who come on the show, regular contributors, a lot of people. There's a lot that goes into making this happen every day, and it's awesome to be here. So biggest game of the year tonight, of course. How can we forget? Biggest game of the year.
Well, you know what I mean? Listen, I'll just quickly mention this. I mean, I guess it was, February 9th of 2021 when the lights went out suddenly. And, our sports community was left with, going from, a 24-hour sports station where you had local programming for the better part of 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day, in addition to games, which, of course, went over in that final year over to CJOB. And when we started this, we wanted to try to bring some of the content that we were doing daily on the radio to a new format so it would still be there. And, the way things have just grown day after day has been, honestly, better than we could have imagined. And it's been, I think, the consistency of doing these shows every single day, win or lose, that has allowed us to grow. But a big part of it has been the grassroots support we get from everyone that is jumping on into the chat with us on the YouTube shows. And of course, the huge number of people that aren't necessarily able to join us between 1 and 3 when we're live, but listen on the podcast. So certainly a collective effort, coming out of a pretty dark situation. And at the same time, I do want to give a big shout out to Illegal Curve, who, of course, in different incarnations of their show, have been doing things for 14 years. They had a big anniversary earlier this year. And, of course, our great friends, Kenny and Rennie, who have grinded it out, doing post-game shows throughout, as well as some pop-up shows as well. The digital space right now for Winnipeg Jet fans is plentiful. Listen, if you're driving around looking to listen to it nonstop on your A&M radio, unfortunately, that option is no longer there. But honestly, I think we're still in a pretty good place as a sports community, and we're happy and proud to be a part of it. So cheers to you all. But yes, Remo, back to tonight. Biggest game of the year, which got a little bit bigger last night. You knew it was going to be a 3-point game between Minnesota and Calgary. And a kind of a bizarre game. Gustafson and Markstrom in an absolute goaltending duel that went through overtime. An offside challenge negated a wild win, and Calgary wins it in overtime, a shootout, I should say. And, that old thing in the car, the objects in the mirror are closer than they appear. Well, the Calgary Flames are a heck of a lot closer after that game last night, just 4 points behind the Winnipeg Jets. The Jets do have a game in hand. That game will be tonight. Huge opportunity for the Winnipeg Jets, but also a massive challenge as this is getting real right now just to make the playoffs.
Yeah, and looking back, the Jets got off to this really hot start, and now they've played not great since about January 1. I think their talent level is somewhere in the middle. And again, if we go to our preseason expectations, I think the Jets, where they are right now, lines up with what we thought they were in the preseason. However, when you have that hot of a start, I think it changed a lot of our expectations, maybe our perception of the team. We know they can go on these good runs, and they can go into slumps. And this game against Minnesota, big. Every game is the biggest game of the year, but a divisional game Wednesday, national TV. I don't know how many other games Sportsnet's broadcasting tonight, but the Jets will be on it, and
you'll be able to know by checking out the intermission.
Yeah, and one thing about Minnesota that I've noticed, since January 1, they've scored the least goals in the NHL, and I don't think of Minnesota as a team that struggles to score at all with Kaprizov and Zuccarello, but they've also allowed among the fewest. I think it was one of the bottom 5 fewest teams since January 1. I'm using the calendar change just as a reference point, but the one guy, maybe this was like the trade of the offseason, and we didn't think much of it at the time. We thought Ottawa was getting the win, acquiring Cam Talbot from Minnesota for Philip Gustafson. But here's Gustafson's numbers, Huss. Let's look at these numbers. 30 games played. Sorry, is this real? 1.91 goals against average?
Yeah, it was 206 heading into Saturday, and he had another shutout.
Yeah. 935 save percentage. Well, thankfully for the Jets, Huss, Minnesota played yesterday, and I'm assuming it's going to be Marc-Andre Fleury in net, who hasn't been as good. But I mean, that's a reason why Minnesota is where they are, despite not being able to score. So, well, and we know the Jets have had their own issues with scoring as well, but they were able to get a couple against Edmonton. It's just going to be, I think, it just shows it's going to be tough for them tonight. And we haven't talked about the lines, but Pierre-Luc Dubois game time decision.
Yeah, we will get to that in just a second. I mean, listen, the Cam Talbot trade, Bill Guerin. Listen, as far as NHL GMs go, he's been dealing with a massive cap hit from, buyouts that happened before he got there. Cam Talbot and Marc-Andre Fleury were there. Cam Talbot wasn't, liking his position, said he maybe wanted out, and Bill Guerin would said, don't let the door hit you on the way out. Beat it. Traded him for Philip Gustafson. Got probably, $3 million cap space. Gustafson's only making $787,000 this year. He is an RFA. He'll be due for a big raise, and that could not have turned out much better. By the way, a quick thank you. Shout out to Mohammed Jahangard. Greetings from Los Angeles. Came across your show a week ago and been listening since then. Very informative. Thank you. Thank you, Mohammed, and great to have you tuning in from LA, and very much appreciate that generous super chat. And shout out to Coachy51 with another super chat in. Congratulations on the WST birthday. Great job, guys. Love the show. Thank you very much, Coachy. As far as those lines, as you mentioned, Reem, I mean, there is somewhat of a question mark as to whether we will see Pierre-Luc Dubois in the lineup tonight. Wasn't in practice yesterday. And the way things look today, assuming that Dubois can play, will be Connor Scheifele, Niederreiter, Dubois with Ehlers and Wheeler, Lowry, Barron, and Nemetsnikov, and Kevin Stenlund in between Saku Menelainen and Mason Appleton. We did see a swap yesterday of Appleton and Barron, but it does seem like from the morning skate, they've gone back to those lines that we saw in their last game. Little bit of a shakeup, though, on the blue line. Morrissey and Pionk together, Dillon and DeMello. And it looks like Logan Stanley is in with Nate Schmidt over Dylan Sandberg. Connor Hellebuck will be the guy. If Dubois can't go, Gustafson is likely to come in. And I think about that comment in chat yesterday from Mitch from Winnipeg Hockey Talk, saying that he wouldn't mind to see Stanley in this game. Well, Logan Stanley's going to get that opportunity to do exactly that. And interestingly, speaking of Stanley, Remo, he also had the opportunity to speak to the reported trade request that was made heading into the trade deadline. Didn't really say yes or no on that, but did say he's happy to be here with the team that drafted him. And listen, whatever happened in the background, this is a big opportunity for Stanley to show that he deserves to be in the lineup with a strong game tonight.
Yeah, we talked, with actually had a good video on our channel, you and Frank talking about what Logan Stanley's value would be, but we did have that report last week from Andy Strickland saying he requested a trade. I think if, where there's smoke, there's fire, and Ken putting out the tweets. Yeah, he said he's focused on helping the team win games, making a deep playoff run. Says he loves Winnipeg since the day he was drafted. Everyone's treated him amazing. Other than the cold, no complaints about the city or the organization. Been treated, and my family's been treated really well. Says I'm happy. The team that drafted you is always the team you want to play for a long time. We have a great group in here and a lot of good friends. And I'm already seeing in chat, Huss, people think Stanley's 6'7", so you have all these thoughts about what a 6'7" guy could do. And I'm already seeing people in chat saying Stanley versus Ryan Reeves tonight. And I don't know if they brought him in to put a spark. I don't think of him. He has fought, but I don't think of him as a tough guy or a fighter or anything, but this has been a pretty big rivalry, and the Jets got spanked in Minnesota earlier this year. I don't know, maybe they do need Dubois fought before. He's not a big fighter, surprisingly. Maybe there is something going down.
I'm not sure anyone, Ryan Reeves has been in, a few fights. The one guy I remember fighting Reeves was Adam Lowry. And Lowry has been a guy that has sort of stepped up when his team had needed him when it comes to some of the rough stuff. But I really do think it's more of a physical element. And listen, I mean, Logan Stanley, certainly he's big. I don't think, in my personal opinion, he's played big enough, often enough. And that's part of the reason why, for more often than not, he hasn't been in the top 6 this year for the Winnipeg Jets. But I'll tell you what, if he wants to make a statement to Rick Bowness that he should be a regular, having a big physical presence tonight against the team that is going to bring that in front of Connor Hellebuyck is a hell of a good place to start. And he is getting a big opportunity to come back in. I mean, I don't think Dylan Sandberg's done anything that's played his way out of the lineup. But again, we'll try and hear from a little bit of Rick Bowness a little bit later on after we talk to Trevor Kidd. But I mean, Stanley's only going to get so many chances. This is another one in a huge game for the Winnipeg Jets, and he could help his team, but also help himself personally by coming out, being steady, playing hard, playing tough, and helping his Jets get a massive 2 points.
Yeah, and for them, I mean, keys, score. See if you can put the puck in the back of the net, capitalize on the chances. We're going to keep an eye on the power play tonight, going 0 for 6 last game. Something's got to give here, Huss. And, Hellebuyck starting and goal, no surprise there after Rittich got the start yesterday. And, with a couple days off here, he's going to be rested and energized and give the Jets the boost that they need as, try to keep pace here in the playoffs, as you said, 5 points or 4 points now ahead of Calgary, but with the one game in hand.
That was the thing that burned me so bad. Not only did I tweet out after that the Wild had won in the shootout, I actually even took a picture of the standings. Like, ESPN had updated the standings and had the Flames 5 points back. And then after a couple people had mentioned, what are you talking about? Went back, refreshed it, and that extra point in the standings got added. So this really is a crucial game to start off 5 of the toughest games the Winnipeg Jets are going to be playing in a row all season long. I know I've been referring to the schedule and the challenges that are coming up for the Winnipeg Jets. Well, it's here. Minnesota tonight, a massive divisional game against a team that's had their way with Winnipeg so far this season. And then Florida, Tampa, Carolina, Boston, at a time of the schedule that they absolutely need points. And Reem, not to spend too much time talking about the last 2 months, but give a hat tip to Connor Hrabchak on Twitter, who put together the NHL record since New Year's Day. And the Chicago Blackhawks, 14-13-1 for 28 games, 29 points in 28 games. Jets, 13-12-2, 28 points in 27 games. And that's 2 points better than the Anaheim Ducks in one more game. And the Ducks are 11-11-4. All that being said, if you told me that this team went 500 and got 5 points out of the next 10 available, or even 6, I would take that in a heartbeat, because as we mentioned, they are going up against some of the best teams in the league. And certainly the Wild have been playing like one of the best teams in the league as of late. They got a nice boost from their general manager at the deadline with a few additions, both in and out. Great value what they got for Jordan Greenway, and then brought in Johansson, and of course, John Klingberg as well, who I'm sure will add a new element to that power play.
Yeah, really. Yeah, I like the moves Minnesota made. And they also had brokered a couple deals, paid the role of money launderer. What was it in the Kane deal? I forget what. There was like 2 deals that they took on salary cap and received picks from it. Sorry if I'm forgetting them. But yeah, you look at the Jets schedule coming up, like next week. Tampa, Carolina, Boston, all back to back to back. That's not ideal. Plus Florida, who's been playing, pretty well, even though they're outside the playoffs.
They beat Vegas last night, and you want to talk about a desperate hockey team.
Yeah. That's
the Florida Panthers right now. I mean, even if they play very well, they might have blown it already because some of the teams around them have less points or have less games played. And of course, I'm sure Paul Maurice is going to want to give one to his old club after what happened here in Winnipeg earlier this season. But this is on the Jets tonight to rise up to the occasion And we're going to talk about that with Trevor Kidd in just a second. You know what, listen, before we get to Trevor, hey, shout out to Tico Napoli. Look at T, you want to talk about dedication to the show. Tico Napoli is at the docks, so can't watch the live show, but happy birthday, gang, and throw a nice little super chat in. Tico Napoli, truly a WST legend. Let me give a big thanks to Donnie and the gang down at Manitoba Battery. Of course, they're the leaders for all things batteries in Manitoba. And if you're in need of a battery for your car, your truck, or even that summer toy you're working on this winter, Manitoba Battery is the most convenient and well-priced option in the city, where you can put the order in for your battery at lunchtime or around the start of Winnipeg Sports Talk live at 1 and have it sitting on your doorstep in 2 to 4 hours for less money that you'd spend anywhere else in Winnipeg on the same battery. Basically, the Amazon of batteries here in Winnipeg, but shopping local and getting the best price. Makes too much sense. No fighting for a parking spot at Costco, waiting in line at Canadian Tire, spending more money on batteries at the big box stores. Let Manitoba Battery bring the battery to you while you spend time on more important things. You can call in that order or talk to them about whatever you need, 204-783-8787. You can order online at manitobabattery.com, or you can always pop by and see them at 1026 Logan Avenue. Big shout out to the fellas over at Consolidated Supply, ready for golf season and working hard with the best in irrigation products and solutions, as well as artificial turf. And listen, they may be the leaders in the golf industry, but they can also be for you with any sort of work you might be doing on your property. In addition to that, they are, of course, the club car dealer for Manitoba. So if you've got a need for golf carts of any sort, or maybe just one to maybe trick out and run around with in the summer, Joe Spicy and the gang have got that for you as well. Also got great options on spas, hot tubs, outdoor kitchens, and more. Pop down and see the guys at 1395 Niagara Road East, or you can find out more on everything they can do for you, including small engine parts and repair, online at cte.ca. Still welcoming in nominations for February's Unsung Hero with Wallace and Winnipeg Jets defenseman Josh Morrissey. Send us an email to unsunghero@winnipegsportstalk.com. Let us know about that person in your community doing great things for others through charity work, volunteering, or maybe being that go-to person on the block when others are in need. You can let us know by emailing about that person at unsunghero@winnipegsportstalk.com. February's winner will win an autographed jersey from Jets All-Star defenseman Josh Morrissey. And Wallace will also make a $500 donation in the nominator's name to the Dream Factory, which will be matched by Josh and Margot Morrissey. Just before we talk to Kidder, a big thanks to our friends at Vita Health Fresh Market, another great sponsor of Winnipeg Sports Talk, with great prices on natural and organic supplements, beauty products, and groceries, and Winnipeg's largest assortment of local products, too. Great non-alcoholic craft beer, mocktails, and some great snacks just in time for St. Paddy's Day. And with spring just around the corner, fellas, get ready for it with Ultimate Male Energy. Formulated specifically for men over 35, Ultimate Male Energy is designed to help improve testosterone production, reduce excess body fat, build muscle tissue, maintain prostate health, and more. And it's on sale today at Vita Health. Vita Health Fresh Market, empowering people to lead healthy lives. 7 Winnipeg locations, including the newest store in Linden Ridge, and online at myvita.ca. All right, Murat coming up a little later on. We'll try and get you a little bit of Rick Bowness audio from this morning, post-morning skate. And we'll also get the latest on the Visiting Wild with Jessi Pierce later on in the show. But right now, let's welcome in former NHLer and our great friend, Trevor Kidd, for the latest, his thoughts on the Jets. Kidder, what's going on? Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me, Huss. All good. Looking forward to, a pretty big game here tonight against the Minnesota Wild.
I have a feeling we're going to be saying that a few times over the course of the next month and a half. It is sort of crazy that, we're here, Calgary, after that win last night, and of course, a 3-point game against the Wild is just 4 points back of the Winnipeg Jets. And I mean, it's easy to look at the teams behind you and around you, but I'm sure you'd agree this starts within that Winnipeg Jet locker room to get out of a funk that really is extended for the better part of the last couple months.
Well, and it's funny you say that, a couple months, because, a lot of the banter in quite a few circles, they keep talking about, the last 2 to 3 weeks haven't been well. And Huss, you're one of the few guys I was saying earlier that myself as well, this goes back well into early December, when some of the players who were injured in December started coming back, and they really haven't been able to find, for all that excitement that was generated, built coming out of training camp, systems, culture, again, excitement that we spoke about, October, November, all the hay that they put in the barn from the standings and top of the conference, they just haven't been able to find that X factor. I mean, there's been little bits and pieces here and there where you think they've gotten it back on track, and then you see some of the consistencies or misgivings in other areas in following games. So it's been a tough go, and they're still in it. Certainly, to some degree, it's less about looking forward and perhaps more of what's coming up from behind, and that being the Calgary Flames. And it's a tough schedule here for them. That San Jose Sharks game, which was, they're one of the bottom feeders. They got a point out of that. Would have been nice to get 2, but what they have for the next 4 or 5 games here is going to be a challenge, and they're going to have to dig deep to find, again, working together, supporting one another, the compete, the battle, all the cliches, the 60 minutes, one shift at a time, as crazy as it sounds. They have to get back to those kind of basics here and try and put, period shifts together and put a game together where they feel good about themselves, because there's been a lot of, again, when it comes to the inconsistencies, there's been decent games where you say, well, the offense might be going here. We look at the Oilers. We put in 5-6 goals, but there's been a lot of yeah buts. Yeah, but this wasn't good, or yeah, but that guy didn't play well, or yeah, but the bottom 6 isn't contributing, or the power play isn't doing this. And it's been a tough go, and it's not going to get any easier for the Winnipeg Jets.
Kidder, you spent a long time in the National Hockey League. I'm sure you were on some teams that were in very different situations. Take us inside the room right now for a team that had such a great start, that had a big cushion. What do you think's going on, within the team right now? And maybe what's the biggest challenge? What's the biggest challenge for Rick Bowness right now? To try to ground his team and get them back to playing the way that made them so successful in the first half of the year?
Somehow they have to go back and talk about training camp. To me, you have to find what happened there in regards to getting guys to buy in, to re-find that X factor that they had to start the season. And there's a lot of hope in me that maybe someone bottled that, because if they did, now's the time to open it. There's been some individual moments with how they played here over the last couple months, and there's been some games certainly where they put the puck in the net. But this team and what they did, it was all about that X factor, and it was a whole bunch of things. But I think back to, October, November, it was the compete. It was the battle. It was being relentless on the puck. How many times did you see, whether that be a forward coming back, whether that be a defenseman, just hard on pucks, hard on body, creating separation. And that was all over the ice, Huss. We saw the Winnipeg Jets attacking as a 5-man unit. How many times did we talk about Josh Morrissey's continuing to put points, but Josh Morrissey seems to be the only D-man that is involved in the offense right now. And you think back to October, November, you had all of them contributing, and we just haven't seen that, the Winnipeg Jets attacking as a 5-man unit. A big part of that attack and the defenseman getting up, and when you say attacking, I go, harken back to the Dustin Byfuglien days, and that's where, Josh Morrissey has found some successes. D-man playing below the top of the circles in the offensive zone, playing below the face-off dots. You've seen Josh Morrissey, even that game against the Sharks, he's in the blue paint in front of the opposition's netminder, But again, it's only Josh Morrissey at the moment. Yes, Nate Schmidt had a nice goal there against the Sharks, but when you talk about consistencies, the Jets D-man, again, tacking as a 5-man unit, the consistencies that I talked about has just been gone. And a part of that, then the flip side, is the defending. When I think about October, November, the defending, how the Winnipeg Jets shut down the opposition's offense by defending so far up the ice. They were breaking up plays at the offensive blue line. They were breaking up plays at the red line. Now it seems it's gone back to go back to last year where they're defending further into their own end. They're trying to break up plays off the rush. They're trying to hold their blue line where it wasn't that long ago, 3 months ago, 2 months ago, all that defending, generally speaking, was happening so much further up the ice. And then, the last part is the support. And I think, the trust, the being there for one another. And you think about being there for one another, that we're talking about emotions here and something else. But it's just that support that you see on the ice, where that guy is, that 5-foot play, that 5-foot support. A lot of times you're seeing the long bomb here from behind the net into the neutral zone. When you talk about October, November, that support was in the defensive zone. That was at the faceoff dot. That was at the hash marks. Those passes were right there, were easy to find for the D-man. It was 1-2 passes out of the defensive zone into the neutral zone with speed. So to me, this is, when you talk about what's gone or what needs to get recaptured, what Rick Bowness needs to go back to, it's the systems, it's the compete, it's the battle, it's giving a hoot about about one another out there and making the Scheifele's and the Wheelers and the Connors. Again, what was so impressive going back to those early months of the year was the attention to detail that the Winnipeg Jet best players had with those items. And to a man, your best players need to be your best players, yes, on a given night. Your best players need to be your best detail-oriented players on a nightly basis as well. And, not to point the finger at the top six, certainly the bottom six is, plays an equal part in some of this. And as I mentioned, attacking defensemen as a 5-man unit. As a group, you could look in each little individual area, but when I say individual, a lot of this starts with that individual caring, support, being there, compete, battle. If they can have that relentlessness that they had at the start of the year, then I think you'll start seeing some things come.
Well, the one guy that has been relentless and has been, stepping up when the teams needed it, and you mentioned, is Josh Morrissey. I mean, we've seen where this team has really been in a funk on a couple of occasions. I mean, the St. Louis game, obviously at the end of January, heading into the break, when the team was really struggling. I mean, his performance in the third period, maybe one of the highlights of the entire season. And even though it didn't go their way against the Kings in the extra frame, his performance last week with 2 goals and 2 assists, I think, was another example of that. But we can talk about the bottom 6 all we want. I mean, there has been, some goals that have been scored from that group over the past week, and Adam Lowry getting the grill off his back was huge.
Right.
But, I think you named it. The big guys up front, Mark Scheifele, Kyle Connor, Nikolaj Ehlers, Pierre-Luc Dubois. I mean, those 4 guys, to me, are going to be, they are the difference makers. Connor Hellebuyck, obviously, but and for those players, it's just been incredibly uneven performances and not a lot of chemistry on those games. That being said, Nito Niederreiter has really brought in a jolt of energy, I think some physicality. He's been the best guy out there as of late. The big question is whether, particularly Mark Scheifele, who, of course, is a guy that, has a lot on his shoulders when it comes to the offensive carrying the mail with the Winnipeg Jets, needs to get going. And you mentioned about the details. I think there's a lot to be said about the lack of defensive pressure and how that leads to the lack of puck control and offensive opportunities. And for whatever reason, it seems like they've had to work that much harder to get the puck. And it's taken away from a lot in the offensive end. But there's a lot of things that haven't been going right, just right down to the simple things like putting passes into skates and whatnot, Trevor. And obviously all those things can add up to a tough run. That being said, I mean, they can't dwell on this. They need to be better. And man, they've got an opponent that has had their way with them so far this year in the Minnesota Wild, who, with a lot of challenges, especially with that salary cap, have put together one hell of a season. And this is a team that looks like they are getting ready to play playoff hockey already and not waiting for the middle of April.
Yeah, two things as you're talking there. I agree with you on Niederreiter. He's been a nice little addition. It has to be a little bit frustrating for the group and the squad because, again, it wasn't that long ago, Haas 2 months ago, I would be the first guy to say that Kevin Cheveldayoff needs to sell the farm here and get a whole bunch of big pieces in here because this is it. Like, it's go time for the Winnipeg Jets. Unfortunately, the last couple months and going into the last week, I was like, geez, I hope he doesn't sell the farm here because I'm not sure what's happening with this squad, and you can almost have another conversation about perhaps they should be sellers and not buyers. But the one piece that they did buy in Niederreiter, I agree with you. For the last couple of weeks, he's been a huge, huge addition. And it's he has that style of game. He plays big. But what I've loved about it, and this is to me what a little bit is sticking out in regards to how he plays, and maybe a little lack thereof from some of his surroundings, is where he's generating his offense, Huss. It's right in the middle part of the ice. It's right in the slot. It's right in the tough areas. And you look at the goals and the impact that he's having, and that be on the power play and or 5-on-5. He's getting into those middle part of the ice. It's not easy to be in there. You're going to get hit. You're going to get poked. You're going to get scratched. You're going to get marked up. But he wants to be in there, and he's generating offense from that spot. And, again, if you're some of the other guys, Nick Ehlers has struggled. But the one thing, I go back to the Sharks game, and I mentioned this to Sarah post-game on the Jets TV, is Nick Ehlers, maybe didn't factor in the scoreboard here tonight, but he had a couple nice center lane drives. He was in around the blue paint a little bit. Those are the type of things when you talk about the big guns, the top six for the Winnipeg Jets. They're all talented guys. They all have a bunch of speed. But the NHL is, the goaltenders are too good. You can't play on the periphery. You can't play on the perimeter. You have to get into those hard areas of the ice. I'm watching the Tampa Bay Lightning yesterday, and they've been struggling a little bit, but you watch their power play. When the puck goes to the point, Kucherov and Stamkos aren't still sitting on the faceoff dots. They are in front of the net, nearly taking one-timers off their buckets to try and find a rebound, to try and find a greasy goal, to try and create chaos and havoc in front of the net. And so it's that nastiness, that X factor, that battle, that compete, that the group in general needs to get back to. And and I said this the other night too. The one good thing about, and you had mentioned it, Huss, the Minnesota Wild coming into town, is that is almost a guarantee when those two teams play that there is going to be some sort of nastiness involved, or it's going to be a fight or a dirty hit or like, you can't go through the motions if you're either one of these teams, because it'll be lights out early. And that might play into the hands here of the Winnipeg Jets. Again, Minnesota had the game last night, and it was a tough game. They lost 1-0, but they worked, so they could be tired. They should be tired. But with that said, Minnesota will be ready here. This is a big game. It's a natural game for both teams to get up for. And as I mentioned, the nastiness, I just hope that plays into the hands of the Winnipeg Jets here. Maybe them getting back on the tracks and finding their game.
Well, it's a great point, and you can speak to this as well, Trevor. They haven't played Minnesota for a while. You're always looking at the team in the standings, and you're quite familiar with the club. But the Jets have been manhandled by that club twice. I believe the goals in the two games are 10-2 so far this year. And
right.
Rick Bowness mentioned after that ugly game a couple weeks ago against the Avalanche that hockey tests your character and tests your pride. And in addition to everything that has been surrounding with the club, with the results that haven't been going their way, I like to think that the memories of getting it handed to you might bring out the best in them tonight. And that will be another test of, to get through this adversity. And maybe a team like the Minnesota Wild at this point of the year can bring out the best in the Winnipeg Jets. Jet fans can certainly only hope that that'll be the case.
I agree. And you're right. It is there might be some reflection, certainly going back to, both games, as you mentioned. Minnesota's pretty easily handed Winnipeg to not so pleasant losses. There will be some reflection, I'm certain on that. But, I mean, there would be reflection if Winnipeg was not in the position that they are now and maybe a little bit further up in the sun and, in the same conversation as the Dallas Stars and the Colorado Avalanche and, first in the conference and all that banter and conversation we had 2 months ago. You have the Calgary Flames here knocking on the door behind you. And the game, the reflection is, as I mentioned, what we talked about earlier here, is somehow getting, they get it. They haven't played well against Minnesota, but they haven't played that well here in the last couple months and certainly the last 3 weeks if you're to put a microscope on things. So they have to find it somewhere. They have to look within, certainly now with the trade deadline over, right? And it seemed to be a lot of the conversation leading up to is Chevy maybe getting some help and looking outwards to maybe get, whether it be shoring up the, finding a winger there on that second line, Niederreiter being a part of that, or getting some depth in that bottom six. That's all done and gone with now. Like everything now until the end of the year is all internal. They have to find it within. And it's still a struggle to this point. There has been bits and pieces of it, as I mentioned, the Oilers game, the Kings game, as you mentioned, some of these blowouts where the offense seems to be clicking, but there's that but where it's not quite a Picasso per se, and there's components that are missing. And you mentioned the conversations within the locker room. Certainly they're looking at one another, but certainly they have to be looking at each other in regards to what they're going to bring out as an individual perspective, and not playing individually, but individually buying into the system, buying into the culture, buying into what it takes to be successful in that X factor part of it that I spoke about earlier.
Well, and Kidder, just before we go, I mean, the one thing you can speak to is goaltending. And listen, David Riddick's had a couple. The Columbus goal that one went in. I mean, the goal against San Jose probably doesn't like it too much. I'm sure he'll get a couple starts the rest of the way. But 3 days off for Connor Hellebuyck, back in the net tonight. I would imagine this is a time to ride your horse that got you here. And no doubt about it, the guy that could be the most impactful, regardless of what happens in front of him, is that horse wearing number 37 that we'll see tonight.
Well, and totally, Huss. I mean, this is it. And Riddick has played good. I mean, tough loss for him there. I mean, the equalizer against the Sharks, a point shot that gets redirected to hurdle right on his, tape, the one-time top shelf, and
no chance.
Logan Couture getting no chance, and Logan getting a breakaway from basically the top of the circles. Nice little play by him. Riddick is. And being a number 2 guy and putting in quality starts and points in the bank, he's done real well this year. Coming into the year, he was self-admittedly struggled and was having a hard time being a number 2 guy and having space and time between games. But I think he's put himself, quite well in this, year to this point, at least with the Winnipeg Jets. But Connor Hellebuyck, yes, come on, he's with the struggles that they're having. Your goaltender might have to bail you out here a little bit for you to find your way. And, certainly tonight might be one of those nights. But again, Connor Hellebuyck is having a darn good year. And that's the one thing that the Winnipeg Jets, regardless of where they are in the standings, just get in and get into the playoffs, because you have a Vezina-style goaltender. And you think about the playoffs, maybe it's one game you find your way. A goaltender can win a series in the playoffs too, and we've seen how that can snowball. So I look to Connor Hellebuyck here to put a lot of pressure on himself. He's done that throughout the year, throughout his time here in Winnipeg, and he'll have to be big here down the stretch for the Winnipeg Jets, and I'm sure we're all confident that he can do it.
Trev, you're the best, man. Thanks so much for doing this. We always love having you on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Enjoy hearing you on OB. Hopefully our paths will cross on one of those pregame shows coming up. And, of course, postgame with Sarah on Jets Live on the YouTube show right after the games. Have a great one and enjoy this one tonight, pal.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it, brother.
Oh, man, that was some great stuff with Kidder. So lucky to have him come with us on the program. And real interesting thoughts on the power play. We're actually going to get to a little bit of Rick Bowness on some tweaks to the power play that we will see tonight, assuming the Jets do get opportunities on the man advantage. Just before we do that, Murat is still to come, as well as Jessi Pierce from the Twin Cities on the visitors tonight. But listen, with this 2-year anniversary today, looking back, have to thank Greg Gerald and the entire Royal Sports team for the amazing support of us. And this goes back many years, all the way back to the NFL Sunday Ticket Show, for those of you that are long enough in the tooth to remember myself, Jim, and Z-Man, and the nonsense we used to do on Shaw TV back in the day. But it makes a lot of sense to be working with Royal Sports because they are the #1 sports superstore in Winnipeg, and they've been doing it family-owned for over 35 years. Anyone that plays hockey knows that they're the hockey superstore. You're talking about the best selection of equipment for both skaters, goaltenders, you'll find around. And when you need a new twig, Royal Sport, the $1 million stick inventory, and great prices on some Warrior sticks right now, up to 50% off. Don't forget, great snowboards, boots, binding services for those of you that might be looking at hitting the hills in and around spring break. And for those of you that are just fans, maybe don't need to get on the ice, but are looking forward to getting into the stands to support your team. An incredible selection of Jets merchandise, Bomber merchandise, and really your favorite teams from around professional sports, including the National Hockey League, NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, and even the soccer fans taken good care of with the best jerseys and kits from around the world. Pop down and see them at 750 Pembina Highway. And make sure to follow them on Instagram at Royal Sports Pembina. They do a great job of dropping the latest merchandise that's come in, as well as any pertinent sale information for you. And also have to thank our friends at F Apparel. Andrew Parks and his team are the spots for custom suits and clothing for men. And having, dealt with F Apparel and, got suits, I probably never do anything else because the entire process is very simple and painless. You go in, get measured up, figure out what colors you want, fabric, styles, and a few weeks later, you've got a beautiful custom suit. But more than just custom suits, beginning at $400. Chinos, golf pants, an amazing selection of shirts, both more formally as well as casual, to be meant to be worn both tucked and untucked. Pop down and see them for yourself at 190 Smith Street downtown. You can also make an appointment or order online at ephabparel.com. Don't forget about the 15% discount for wedding parties when you get your suits at F Apparel. And for all 2023 high school graduates, get that new suit for the big day. F Apparel will hook you up with a free custom shirt and tie valued at $150. And of course, another great thank you to Boston Pizza. Andrew, the Enrights, have been with us since day one as well. Really appreciate their support, and what a perfect partner to have in BP, because of course BP, a favorite of mine, before and after Jet games down at City Place, and the best place to watch the game when they're on the road or if you're not at the arena. Who can complain with delicious BP wings, gourmet pizzas, those ice-cold schooners, and more. Check out their new seasonal menu as well with some really great new offerings. And you can always order online if you're not making it out at bostonpizza.com. All right, Murat is going to join us in a few minutes, and we'll talk more about tonight's game as well as a long read he has on Nikolaj Ehlers this year. But as we talk with Trevor, the Jet power play has been problematic over the last little while. 0 for 6 in the game against San Jose did not help the cause. And Rick Bowness today, after the morning skate, talked about some changes to the power play for tonight. Here's what Coach had to say.
Swapping Kyle and Mark on the flanks for a first power play unit. How does Nino's work in the bumper? Perhaps How did that lead to giving you those options?
Well, it's not so much Nino and the bumpers. It is we're trying to generate more shots. We're just clearly not getting enough shots on our power play, so it's a way of getting these guys to come up higher and have a little more time to shoot the puck. But our biggest goal, regardless who's in the bumper position, we need more shots. And putting those guys coming downhill, they're our pure goal scorers. They're going to be able to get hopefully more pucks on net.
Have you been finding that opposing teams' penalty killers have been taking away Kyle's one-timer or the cross-seam out? That's been
well, they have.
Motivation.
If you watch them, it's like when you're playing Ovechkin. You know he's going to shoot the puck. Stammer in Tampa, so that D is always rushing out at him and getting in the lane. So this is a way of getting him. You got to change it up every once in a while and give it a different look. The league is very well coached. It's very well pre-scouted. It's like our penalty killer. We know what the opposition wants to do. Scotty does a great job breaking it down. So they know where he is, and we're just trying to move him around a little bit and see if we can generate more shots.
All right, so there's a little bit of bones. So a swap of Connor and Scheifele from their positions on the power play. And, one of the things that really stood out to me in our conversation with Trevor was him talking about that Tampa power play and, how aggressive they are in and around the net, the number of bodies they have around there. And that, I'm sure, will be something the Winnipeg Jets would like to have. But I can't say that I'm surprised, Reem, that they are looking for a few tweaks to the power play because it hasn't been as fluid. It hasn't been as successful as it was earlier in the season. And the Jets need to turn that around right now because with the lack of consistent goal scoring they've had, you have to make the most of those opportunities on the power play.
Yeah, when you're coming off a game where you lose by a goal and you go 0 for 6 on the power play, I think you're going to look at what can you do better. And it's not just one game. We've seen a bit of a trend here, and I agree. The power play, they've been standing around back to last year looking for that perfect play, that perfect one-timer, but also if you are getting the shots off, they're kind of from the side, and you don't really have anyone in front causing havoc. I do like the Nino Niederreiter. I think we can all agree this is a great acquisition, and he brings skills to the team that they didn't have. Big bodies, scores goals in front of the net, and had actually an amazing shot, spin top corner in the slot area for last game. So, maybe if you're on your off, they moved them to their off wings, Connor and Scheifele, to their regular wings. But now you can't do one-timers. Maybe it'll force them to shoot more or different look or give them a different mentality instead of, I'm just going to park up here, hold my stick in the air and wait for this perfect one-time pass. We'll see what happens. I don't know if they're going to, I think when it was working, they were kind of freewheeling and guys were rotating around up top. Maybe we end up seeing that and, Connor sneaks in for a one-timer somewhere. You'd like to see a power play goal if they're given the opportunity, but I think they'd be lucky to get any goals because Minnesota's given up 10 regulation goals in their last 10 games, which seems insane.
Yeah, it certainly is. Let's get one more clip from Bones before we bring in Murat. And Ringo just mentioned, perfect segue, professional, I might even add.
Thank you.
10 regulation goals in the last 10 games. Gustafson's certainly been a big part of it, but the Minnesota Wild's commitment to defense is helping them win a lot of hockey games, and that'll be a huge challenge for the Jets tonight. Here's Bones on the challenge that the Wild will present to his club when it comes to trying to light the lamp.
If you watched the game last night, Calgary had a lot of great opportunities to score. It didn't go in because the goaltender was making the saves. Great saves. Both goalies were unreal last night watching that game. Because you look at the 0-0 score, and then you watch the game, and you say, wow, there's a lot of great A's at both ends. So you give the goaltenders credit. They decided the outcome of that game, and it goes to a shootout. It wasn't, you look at the score, and you say, that must have been a boring check game. It wasn't. There was great chance right off the bat. Zook walked in on a clear, almost a breakaway, the second shift into the game. So the chances were there. Their goaltending was great. That being said, Minnesota is very good at keeping to the outside. Their D are very good at boxing you out, and you've got a battle to get to their net front. They're big guys, and they box you out really well. So it's one thing to get in the zone, it's another thing to get to the net. And so tonight we're gonna have to keep our D involved, and they're gonna have to be ready to shoot the puck, and they can't wait for someone to get to the net because the shooting lane will be gone. So it's going to be up to our forwards to battle through that and get to the net when it goes to the point.
Yeah, good stuff from Bones. We'll have a little bit more on the Wild, how they've been doing it, with Jessi Pierce a little bit later on the program. But right now, let's welcome in Murat, who, first off, I got to thank Murat for all his great contributions to the show through the first 2 years. And we got a big one tonight and a big read right now at The Athletic. If you haven't checked it out already, a real deep dive on Nikolaj Ehlers, and we will get to that as well as tonight's game, but it's called Breaking Down Winnipeg Jets winger Nikolaj Ehlers by Eye Test Analytics and Rick Bowness's impact. Let's welcome Murat in right now to the program. Murat, how are you, my friend?
Hey, I am honored to be here on the 2-year anniversary show. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me along for the ride that it's been for these 2 years. Yeah, just feeling good.
Well, listen, I think everyone in the chat will feel a lot better if the Jets can get 2 points tonight. Man, Calgary with the win last night, 4 points back. Listen, I've sort of felt like this was almost inevitable with the trend that the Jets have been on, that, we were going to start getting into a situation where there wasn't a huge gap between the clubs and the playoff line. And that's where the Jets are right now, going into arguably maybe the toughest 5 games on the entire schedule all season long.
I mean, yeah, I clock it, at the end of each game, I write a really quick summary at The Athletic in sort of our short form feature. And throughout the first half of the season, one of my last sentences was always, within 2 points of first place in the Western Conference, or has the best points percentage in the Central Division. And now these last little while, it's, hey, Winnipeg's still this many points up on Nashville and Calgary. Games in hand, all of that sort of stuff is the relevant information, because Winnipeg has work to do to make sure that they hold on to the spot that they have. Yes, they have a lead. Yes, they're in control of their destiny. No, things haven't been going super well of late. And, you mentioned the stretch of difficult games ahead. I mean, Minnesota's getting .962 goaltending over its last 10 games. That's incredible. It's going to be a tough one tonight.
Well, and the Wild in particular, even when things were going great for the Jets earlier this season, they seem to be a little bit of the kryptonite. I mean, 6-1 and 4-1 losses earlier this season, and that 6-1 what might be the ugliest one of the entire season. Maybe listen, I'm trying to look at ways that this might actually help this club. I remember Rick Bowness talking about how their character and pride was being challenged. The game does that to you. This team has done that to the Winnipeg Jets, and considering the urgency of their situation right now, if they can raise their level of play and find that against a team that has given them problems, it would bode well for this road trip going forward. But it doesn't diminish the huge task in front of them tonight when the puck drops.
Absolutely, it does not. And I think Minnesota, especially early on in the season for Winnipeg, was kind of this reminder that, hey, you've made some progress, Jets. You've started to play the right way. There's some systemic improvements to how you go about your business. But when you get rattled, you can still get far off of your game. There are still bad habits that can creep into things. And, maybe that was just short-term doses early on in the first half of the season. Fast forward to right now, and you talk about pride, you talk about resilience, and all of those things that Winnipeg is going through. Ideally, these Jets have had to solve enough problems and have gone through enough of adversity to be a more mature version of themselves when, if and when things get tough against Minnesota tonight and in the 4 games that come up, because that's one of the things that they've struggled with in this last, 10, 15, 20 games, or whatever you want to call the slide that the Jets are on, is not just that sometimes they get beat or, somebody makes a great play, somebody makes a great shot, maybe Hemmelgarn doesn't bail them out, whatever it is. It's what happens next. And too often Winnipeg has looked, a bad start and made it a lot worse, gone a little bit more desperate for offense, chased the game, all those sorts of things. I think there's been a gentle turn in the right direction along those lines, even though they lost an OT and they're not coming off a win. But Minnesota's going to test that, and it's going to test that quite a bit.
Yeah, you mentioned Monday. I'm interested in your thoughts. I mean, there was a lot of disappointed people because of the results. I mean, overall, the Jets certainly did carry the play, but I can remember games last year when, they had crazy shot totals, but everything was from the perimeter. They didn't have any of those really great chances and didn't score enough and were on the wrong end of the scoreboard. What did you make of the performance on Monday, as well as their inability to hold on in that final 2 minutes and eventually coming out with only one of a game that they really did need to?
Yeah, they needed to. I don't want to say they deserved to because they didn't close it out, and that's something that they'll need to work on. But in terms of if you just look at the quality of chances they got, I believed in that game. I don't think San Jose was particularly good in that game, to tell you the truth. And Winnipeg did itself a disservice by not burying early and often when it was generating all sorts of chances. Morgan Barron probably had nightmares about those two shorthanded chances. Kyle Connor's not as crispy as he's been of late. There have been some times where the puck's on his stick in dangerous places and he's kind of fanning or not getting the shot that I assume that he wants out of it. Even Niederreiter, he scored, but there were a couple of times where he picked up slot passes from Mark Scheifele and didn't get the quality of shot that he probably would have liked. If you look at the types of chances Winnipeg created, you like most of that game, and it was on them to finish and bury and get out of there with 2 points and not just one. Obviously, that's not what happened, but it's a different flavor of loss than there have been at times during their slide. And it's definitely a different flavor of loss compared to last year as well. I think it's the sort of game that maybe a team that's struggling finds a way to lose. I think Minnesota is going to be a tougher test, though, so they could play at least that well, if not better, get another goal or two, and still be in tough, against the Minnesota Wild tonight.
No, that's a great point. And one of the things that we just heard a clip from Rick Bowness on that was, glaring on Monday night was that over 6 number on the power play. How are things different right now? Why do you think the power play has struggled the way that it has as of late? And what did you make of the swap of Scheifele and Connor that we just heard Bones discuss?
Yeah, when it's easy to cherry pick power plays sometimes because they're small samples compared to the rest of the game. But that caveat out of the way, you watch Winnipeg and you compare it to, say, the Edmonton Oilers that are just unstoppable on the power play. And there's two enormous differences to my way of thinking. One is that the puck does not move very quickly around the ice. Two, a team like Edmonton or some of the elite power play teams around the league, every player is a threat in a few different ways. They might shoot, they might pass, and if they pass, there are a couple of different places that they might move that puck to. Maybe the players rotate in and out of their positions over the course of the power play as well. I think only some of the more elite power plays do that. Winnipeg seems to be moving the puck around the perimeter, not quickly enough to open up seams or move defenders around. Also not incisive enough with their passes to move defenders around. There have been some times, too, where I think the sort of do I shoot, do I pass decision happens slower for the Jets than for other teams, especially of late. I thought Dubois was a pretty bad offender of that, playing the bumper position or sometimes beside the net, where it seemed like he would almost inevitably pass across to a covered player, even though there was a net drive opportunity there. I think that's why Niederreiter has that job right now. As for the switch, I think it's a switch to create some change and just to create some different looks, because Kyle Connor hasn't had shooting success on the power play of late. Mark Scheifele kind of the same. These are quality players. They can do so many things, but I think that it's a bit stagnant and it's a bit one look from that Jets top unit of late.
It certainly was concerning in the fact that, you mentioned Morgan Barron. You can make the argument that the Jets had better chances at 4-on-5 than they did at 5-on-4 in that game. And that ain't the way it's supposed to work. And this is a nice transition into a great deep dive on Nikolaj Ehlers' season and where he's at right now. In that when things began, Nikolaj Ehlers was on the top line and was on the top power play, missed an extended period of time, came back, has seen a small amount of time in those roles. But as things have settled out over the course of the past number of weeks, not only hasn't been on the top power play or on the top line, but has seen his ice time diminish. We'll get to the big picture in a minute, but Ehlers in the power play, did that just not work? Were these square pegs, round holes? Or it's still, I have a hard time wrapping my head around a player that is so talented, has traditionally done so many good things when he has the puck on his stick and when he's on the ice, not being able to really fit in on an NHL power play with the man advantage.
Yeah, that's one that I struggle with as well. I mean, you can look at individuals and say, okay, Dubois has a better net front presence. Scheifele can shoot and pass really well. Connor's a sniper. You can kind of do that sort of thing. But if you look at the results that these guys get, Nick Ehlers, points per minute on the power play, and that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to make goals happen. You're trying to get points on the power play. He's a leader on the Jets, not just amongst the better players, but the actual leader in that sort of regard. Part of that is because he is a little bit less predictable in terms of shooting, passing, his movement, those sorts of things. An enormous part of it as well is you can count on him for that zone entry. And, against San Jose the other night, there was that buzz in the air again when Ehlers had the puck, whether it was 5-on-5 or on the power play, even though his unit only got the tail end of shifts, where he picks the puck up and that puck is getting across the blue line and Winnipeg's going to end up with possession. Whether that's him skating it in himself, holding on to it, whether it's him skating in and then a drop pass to a winger at the line or a teammate at the line, or he'll skate, generate speed, and then the defender sort of, I want to say collapse to him, but like they move towards him and he takes up that space, and then he'll do a dump play where he rims it all the way around and a Jets player is ready to pick it up at the other side. You saw all three of those forms for successful entries against the Sharks. That's an enormous part of a power play, especially when you lose the initial faceoff, you have to go back and get it. Well, what happens next? And, Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor have had some success with entries on the top line and the top unit, but there are days where it looks like it's not going for them. And then Ehlers is whipping up the ice, especially against San Jose. He looked particularly sharp again on that. That's an enormous part of a power play as well. So all this talk about fit, I'm like, well, I don't really care how it feels. If the power play is scoring more with the guy on the ice, then he should be on the ice.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of fans that would agree with that. This piece, as I said, and folks, I mean, it's a longer read. There's a number of components to it, but tell us when you decided to do this, Murat, what was the impetus for having this as a topic, and what were some of the areas that you decided to really investigate as to where Ehlers is at, as well as where his team is?
Yeah, I mean, the honest truth is that sometimes I get frustrated by the Nikolaj Ehlers dialogue, and it's almost like Logan Stanley, where you can't say that he made a good play or a bad play without somebody who hates him or loves him as a hockey player chiming in and as like an absolutist take on it. And I think Ehlers is similar to that, where, you can't really write that he's playing well without somebody watch him sort of overpass on a play or, make a play that's a little bit too cute, chiming in and saying, oh, he's a perimeter player, all that sort of stuff. You can't criticize a decision that he makes with the puck without maybe a more data-informed person sort of saying, well, hey, he drives play, look at these charts. And I just thought that it was maybe time to explore both sides of those things as thoroughly as I possibly could. Ehlers is clearly a player that brings out a lot of feelings in fans, media, analysts alike. And I just kind of wanted to explore, what is he actually doing well? Is there any sort of metric-based reason to suggest that this is a bad year for him? Has he struggled? At least, I mean, we can watch him with our eyes, and that's part of the piece as well. And we can talk about his explosiveness. We can talk about overpassing. We can do that. But does that show up in the results? Is he not creating as many chances as he usually does? What about in the defensive zone, where he certainly gets a lot of criticism? He gets taken off the ice late in games. And I wanted to explore those sorts of things with more of a balanced viewpoint, because I think that he's a player that our memories and our emotions completely skew how a lot of us think about him. You watch him overpass in one instance and something goes terribly wrong, and that emotion stays with you, and you think, oh my goodness, like what a waste of a play. And maybe it was a waste of a play. He must not be creating. But then you zoom out and he creates so much, which you can see in the results. Not just fancy stats analytics, but actual goals for the Winnipeg Jets most of the time, that's worth exploring as well. And I just tried to parse through the eyes, the analytics, and give some credence to both sides to Bowness and his sort of arguments that he makes, to the data, and then some of the differences and nuances that maybe, might explain a little bit of why he's at where he's at right now.
Well, you know what? You mentioned the coach. So let's start there. Even after the game the other day, when Bowness was specifically asked about Ehlers' play, it almost came across as somewhat of a lukewarm endorsement, if that makes sense to you. What do you make of the way that he's being used right now, and what we've heard from Rick Bowness on a player with so much talent that has had production in the past, that continues to produce, but has found himself more often than not sitting on the bench in crucial situations and has not managed to click, certainly to the liking of the head coach, enough to stay on that top line, which was where he was pegged right from the first day of training camp?
Yeah, well, I'll spend some time from sort of what I perceive to be Bowness's point of view. And I could be wrong. I'm not in his head. This is how I'm interpreting. Over the offseason, he had a problem to solve. He had a leadership situation. He had a hugely disappointing season. You look at how productive Ehlers was last season and every season since 2019-20, he's led the team in points per minute in all situations. And there was a really, I want to say, easy solution. More Ehlers, better for everybody. And if Scheifele is your go-to number one center, which he was, that was a conversation they had, then are you going to go back to Blake Wheeler, whose minutes need to come down based on his age, whose captaincy you just took away, who, if you give him to Scheifele right off the hop, you're essentially saying, hey, I do it the same way as everybody who came before me? No. Bowness identified that he needed to make a change. He made that change, and for 2 games, it was tremendously productive. And I think there were a lot of results there. The offense was there. The speed was there. The point production was there with Ehlers, Connor, and Scheifele. Pardon my tongue here. But, of course, Ehlers gets hurt. He steps away from the team. Bowness needs other answers, and he finds them and has success with them. Ehlers comes back, and certainly there's some patience that needs to happen. We've looked at the laundry list of players, Andrew Ladd, Andrew Kopp, others who have struggled as they return from sports hernia surgeries. So there's reasons to be patient. I think there's valid reasons to maybe be a little bit cautious about the minutes. So there's like one part of the perception, I think. There's also, when we talk about the numbers, in all of the years up until this one, all of the chances that Ehlers creates, and he creates way more than he gives up, that's largely turned into goals for. If you look at the 5-on-5 plus minus in real goals, Ehlers is generating like 60% of goals scored when he's on the ice. Winnipeg enjoys 60+% of goals when he's been on the ice for the last several years. So coaches have been able to look at, okay, he's a bit chaotic to watch. Sometimes he makes mistakes I don't like, but we tremendously outscore our opposition. And I think that those memories, the goals, the celebrations, all of that sticks in memory. Well, this season, it's exactly 50%. Winnipeg has enjoyed 17 goals with him on the ice at 5-on-5, 17 goals against. And I think when you're a coach and you watch an Ehlers giveaway turn immediately into a breakaway, like what happened with Kyler Yamamoto of the Oilers the other day, and it goes in, you're not thinking, oh, this guy creates 60% of the chances and probably will get 60% of the goals again. You're thinking, gosh, I wish he made a better play on that 2-on-1, and I have horribly negative emotions because we just got scored on in a must-win game. So I think that what's happening a little bit is, one, Ehlers can be coached like all other players. There are strengths and weaknesses in his game. There are puck management decisions you don't like, even if you acknowledge he creates more than he gives up. But also there's a puck luck element to this where he's not finishing as well as he traditionally does. And Winnipeg's goaltending has had really poor results with him on the ice. Those things will even out. But Bowness can't look at his memories and say, well, hey, we're outscoring the other guys, because he's not. And I think that that's all compounding into, okay, chaotic player. We're not dominating in goals, even if we get the chances when he's on the ice. We've got to figure something else out around this player. And I think that the goals will come because I think he has had a mostly good season, even if there's some coachable moments in it.
I'm and I think you nailed that there. I mean, I think there is real-time reactions of people, and this goes with fans, but I think it also goes with coaches when one sort of individual play amongst many stands out and it really does negatively impact you on the scoreboard, I think the reactions to that can be magnified in big ways. And I think that is the case of so far what we've seen from Ehlers at times since he's come back. Part of what you talk about as well is the eye test. And I'm a huge Ehlers fan, always have been. I will admit at times I've been a little underwhelmed on what he and his line mates have been doing at times, especially at 5-on-5. But again, maybe we're just used to a certain level of dominance or, scoring chances being farly tilted in the Jets' favor that maybe haven't been then. But I mean, just when you take away the numbers, which we'll get to in a minute, what have you seen from Nikolaj Ehlers since coming back from his injury? There's been plenty of speculation that, the surgery that he had is one that does take a long time to get forth. I mean, is there anything that sticks out about his game right now that maybe is missing from what we've seen in previous years when he was consistently the most productive player wearing a Jet jersey?
Yeah, I mean, he still is being tremendously productive on a points per minute sort of basis. So I guess I go a few ways with that. Now, remember, before he came back, we were talking, and, I have done this a couple of times. Hey, look at all these guys who have come back from the surgery. They've struggled. Let's be patient. Let's be patient. Let's be patient. I've said that on this show. I've written it at The Athletic. Let's be patient. It may be a while before he's peak Ehlers. Then he rattles off 14 points in 10 games when he comes back from that injury. And so you're wondering, whoa, did I overstate that need for patience in that regard? And I'm not sure. I honestly don't know. I go back and forth on that. Do I think visually that there has been some pop that get you out of your seat feeling when he has the puck? Has a little bit of that gone away? Honestly, in my mind, yes. Yes, I think that there's been some explosiveness missing. He's still a plus skater, but has he been just terrifyingly fast or what have you? I don't necessarily think so. But at the same time, against San Jose, I don't know if you felt it, but I thought that when he was winding up in the defensive zone and he was generating all those entries I was talking about, the fans had a miniature version of that hush, that something might happen vibe again with the puck on his stick. I think that has been missing a little bit, but it was nice to see a turn in that direction. But mostly my takeaway is this. There has been some offensive production, especially when he first came back, but I think it really stands out when he's making, questionable passes on 2-on-1s. He has a net drive where he puts the puck through his own feet and he doesn't get that puck on net. If you have a highlight reel or a low light reel of plays in which Winnipeg makes way too many passes and doesn't shoot, even if he's not the leader of it, he's been in those scenes quite often. And as a zone entry guy, he often has the puck on his stick as the first jet across that blue line. So he's making the first decision, really, with the puck across that blue line. And so he contributes to that overpassing. And I think that when all of the goals are going in, not only do fans feel better, he feels better. There's more confidence in his own shooting and his own playmaking. A lot of that gets dialed in. And then the memories that fans have because he's finishing at a normal rate and the goals are working out on at a normal rate feel a lot better. I think that there's just been some questionable plays that deserve to be addressed and deserve to have coaching impact them, sort of compound, the numbers slump as well.
No, I listen, and I echo those minutes. I mean, I was in the crowd on Monday, and it was a very tight game, albeit not necessarily played that tight. I mean, the Jets had more chances, more shots, more everything, but there did seem to be a little bit more of that burst from Nikolaj Ehlers, and I'm not sure whether that was more that he was able to do more because of the competition they were playing against, but it was a good sight to see. What do the numbers say this year? I mean, you kind of mentioned a couple of those right now, but I mean, what stands out when you dig into the numbers this year, and how different are the results with Ehlers on the ice this year as opposed to the ones that had him at the top of the team for the last number of years?
Yeah, great question. And if you forget his past, forget anything else, and just focus in on this season, does Winnipeg get a freakish amount of chances with him on the ice, or is his impact as isolated by RAPM, regularized adjusted plus minus, rate adjusted plus, oh my goodness, RAPM metrics? When you look at his impact on the ice, Winnipeg still creates a ton of chances with Ehlers on the ice and a ton of chances in good areas of the ice. The Winnipeg Jets still give up a lot of chances with Ehlers on the ice, but just as throughout his career, the amount that they create is more than what they give up. So if you're looking for a guy to help you win, yes, he's offense first. No, he's not a defensive stalwart, but consistently, you look at scoring chances created by the Jets with him on the ice, and you look at his impact isolated by folks like Evolving Hockey or Micah McCurdy at Hockey Viz, then yes, he's still creating a disproportionately high number of chances from great areas. The only slight change is in terms of expected goals, he's historically had an almost incredible, well approaching 3 standard deviations above the mean impact on expected goals for the Winnipeg Jets, and that's looking more like 2 now, which is still a lot. It's like the difference between a whole lot and a lot, and that's the only substantial difference, is that Winnipeg has created slightly less, but it's still a lot, and it's still more than what the Jets give up. So it's not the sort of situation that you'd look at with a tremendous amount of concern. Can he be doing more? Yes, because we've seen it in his career, and we've seen these plays where he sort of overpasses, the confidence isn't there. But there's no argument that he hasn't been helping or that he hasn't been creating a lot for the Jets, not based on the metrics this season.
You know, one of the things that I've always found strange, and I'm not sure, we'd have to go back, and you'd be a perfect guy to ask this. I mean, when was Ehlers the most productive? Who he was playing with? How was he being used? Because we can sit here and it's fun to do a deep dive and talk about one player that's been so important to this Winnipeg Jets team for a number of years, but it is a team game. It is done not individually, but with line mates. And I'll be honest, it's always been strange to me how we've seen so much volatility with Nikolaj Ehlers finding a centerman, a line to consistently be a part and just run with. I mean, what do you make of that? And in your opinion, where's the best fit for Nikolaj Ehlers in the top 6 of the Winnipeg Jets?
Yeah, great question. I think there's a lot of feelings, again, based on the players and coaches' parts that go into this. And just as a random aside, like for years and years and years, after he was elite and he was actually kind of below average, you do a player poll of the NHLPA and say, who's the goalie that you want on the ice? They would say Carey Price, years and years. And the reason is because it feels like you can trust him. There is that sensibility that it feels good. And anybody who's played hockey knows the difference between a goalie that you feel like you can trust and one that you don't, right? So those decisions make their way into the rest of hockey as well. And I would think of the 2018-2019 Winnipeg Jets, where Nikolaj Ehlers played a substantial amount of time with Mark Scheifele and Blake Wheeler, taking some of those minutes from Kyle Connor, who had traditionally played in that spot. And it was the single most productive version of the Scheifele-Wheeler line that they had seen in those years. It was even more productive than the Connor version by goals, by metrics, by how well Winnipeg did when they were on the ice. And yet it was by playoff time, Connor Scheifele-Wheeler again. And you saw that sort of thing. Why does Ehlers why are the Jets quick to move him out of those situations? And I think part of it, this is just, again, my interpretation. I haven't asked this question. I think part of it is that players know what to expect from a Kyle Connor. I think Nikolaj Ehlers is a chaotic player. I think that there are situations where when he makes a pass that somebody's not expecting, or shoots when they're not expecting it, or holds onto the puck, curls around the net, and you're not sure where to go. Like, I think that even if they could rationally say, hey, we actually get way more goals when this guy's playing, there's probably enough moments of frustration when he's on the ice to be like, hey, I got lost in my route because Nikolaj Ehlers played Jazz for a little bit. And that's my interpretation. Again, nobody's told me that. It's just what I see. And I think when you talk about, the fit and all those sorts of things, I think some of that plays a role in coaching decisions and all of that. In terms of an ideal fit right now, I'll go back to what I wrote when Nino Niederreiter was acquired, and I did a video dive on him, is that Niederreiter is such a sneaky good player in terms of attacking lanes in the middle of the ice. he's such an effective player in terms of winning battles in the corners and in front of the net that lead to chances for himself and for his teammates. Scheifele is Winnipeg's best passer from low to high, from outside in, all of those sorts of things. Ehlers is pretty good too. Scheifele is a freak. He's really quite brilliant at it. And neither of Scheifele or Niederreiter has Nick Ehlers' effectiveness when it comes to zone entries and skating that puck up ice. I argued for that when Niederreiter was acquired. Looks like they practiced that way recently as well. So there's a chance we see that as well. It's something that I'd be looking forward to see if I were the Winnipeg Jets as well.
Yeah, and just I know we spent a lot of time talking on Ehlers, but and I'm not sure what this says about the current state of the team, but I've maybe been most impressed amongst all forwards of Nino Niederreiter over the last couple of games. And of course, he scored, hit the post. I mean, he has been impactful. Just your thoughts on Niederreiter and the early returns from the biggest of the two trades that Cheveldayoff made at the deadline.
Just excellent. Absolutely excellent. He's done exactly what you would hope, exactly what his reputation says he's going to do. He wins battles, he takes shots, he fights for space in the corners in front of the net. You know, the comeback against Edmonton starts because he drives the center lane, tries to take a shot, recovers the block, goes and gets it back to the point. He's made plays in the center slot. His hands to take Josh Morrissey's slap pass that was going, I think it was going across the ice to Kyle Connor, but he takes that pass in the middle of the ice, spins and fires into the net. I mean, that was a tremendous play, but he's helping his teammates get the puck and get the puck to dangerous places. To have that player for a second-round pick, a steal on Chevy's part, a great deal. And, you know, it's exactly the player type that Winnipeg needed to add because of the strengths and weaknesses of the other players. If you could have a second Niederreiter, you'd appreciate one on this team.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, we're going to be talking about the visitors who, of course, used to have Nino Niederreiter on their squad coming up in just a minute. Just before we go, back to the present, just thoughts on this game tonight, the challenge that this incredible run the Wild are on defensively. I almost had to look at it again. 10 regulation goals in 10 games. They're getting the goaltending. They seem to have confidence. This is a team that, to me, Murat, has stepped their game up and is playing playoff-style hockey right now. That hasn't been the case with the Winnipeg Jets, and I can't imagine maybe a better test for the Jets to see if they can raise their game against a team that worked them over pretty good a couple times earlier this season, especially at the most important time of this regular season.
Like, there's a reasonable chance things don't go well, but even if they do go well, Minnesota's going to frustrate you. Minnesota's going to frustrate the Jets. It's going to be tough to get chances. You know, you can talk about percentages, and I will. Minnesota in those 10 games has carried a .969 save percentage at 5-on-5 and .962 overall.
Is that
those
good?
Are freakish, better than Vezina totals. Like, incredible. And they've controlled the flow of play. So it's not like they're, you know, it's just goalies. It's also the kinds of chances they've been giving up. But the goalies have been freakish. It's been amazing. And Winnipeg hasn't enjoyed that in this recent stretch. So you combine great goaltending with great chance prevention. Winnipeg could play an excellent game and still struggle and still have those moments like they did against San Jose where they're getting robbed or where they're having a tough time getting to the middle. It's going to be tougher against Minnesota, I should say. All of those sorts of things compound to a potentially frustrating game. And it's a test that Winnipeg needs to pass because we've talked about their resiliency, their pride, all of that sort of stuff. If they give up an early one, what push do they have? Will they cheat for offense? Will they be able to get to those dangerous areas that Niederreiter gets to? Those sorts of things. I mean, it has to be able to beat teams like Minnesota in the playoffs, down the stretch, all of this sort of stuff. So yes, it's a great test. We've said that a couple of times in the last couple of weeks, but it really is a test, and it's a test Winnipeg needs to pass.
Murat, thanks so much. Really enjoyed the piece in The Athletic. We'll look forward to seeing what happens tonight and catching up with you next week after one of the most hellacious road trips on the calendar for the home team tonight. Be well, and thanks for doing this.
You too. Thanks for having me.
There it is, Murat Atesh. Make sure you're giving him a follow on Twitter and check out all of his work over The Athletic. All right, we're not done with this game tonight, though. Really excited for our next guest. Quickly do want to tell you, looking at the Briar right now, Manitoba keeps rolling. Big win over the other Manitoba team, Reed Carruthers, yesterday for Matty Dunstone. Tonight, for the win in the group, 6-0 Dunstone versus 6-0 Kevin Cooey. And Mike McEwen, a Manitoba native, big win earlier today, and they're at 3-2. They'll play tonight as well against BC. Of course, all of our curling reports brought to you by our great friends at Princess Auto. For everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new, Princess Auto's there with the best deals on the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. Check them out at one of 2 Winnipeg locations, Portage Avenue West or Panet Road. You can always shop online 24/7, 365 at princessauto.com. Big cheers to our friends at Canadian Club for their great support of the fellas as well. Of course, you can pop by your local Manitoba Liquor Mart and get Canada's favorite Canadian whiskey, Canadian Club. And it will just be, I would like to say, a matter of days and weeks. It'll be a bit before we're back there at IG Field cheering on the Bombers, enjoying CC and ginger ales. But in the meantime, you can pick up those in cans as well at your local Manitoba Liquor Marts. And a huge thanks to our great sponsors at Culligan Water, family owned for over 65 years in the business, taking care of Winnipeggers and Southern Manitobans' water needs with water softeners, filters, bottled water coolers, whole home systems, and drinking water systems, not to mention citywide water delivery services and commercial and industrial water products and solutions. 1200 Sargent Avenue, 694-5180. You can also check on everything they've got going on at drinkculligan.com. All right, huge one tonight. Whenever the Jets play the Wild, we love welcoming in Jessi Pierce, from the Bar Down Beauties podcast and covering the Wild for NHL.com. And even better, we could have one of our favorite females join us on International Women's Day. Jessi, thanks so much for doing this. It's great to have you back in the peg on Winnipeg Sports Talk. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Well, nervous, to be perfectly honest with you. This team is giving me max stress over the last little while. And after such I think overall, an unexpected, amazing start, it's been some tough sledding for the Winnipeg Jets. And it doesn't get any easier tonight with this Minnesota Wild team coming in. You've been there every step of the way with the team. I was very intrigued as to how they would play because you knew they had the talent on the club. There were some interesting offseason moves. But, I mean, in a salary cap world where everyone is so tight, I mean, they've got this massive cap penalty, and yet nothing seems to faze this team. And, I mean, now we see them playing some of their best hockey of the year, shutting teams down defensively, as Murat just mentioned, having some of the best goaltending in the National Hockey League, and the bottom line, winning games on a consistent basis. I mean, what's happened with this Wild team over the past month? How are they doing it? And how ferocious of an opponent should we be expecting tonight when they drop the puck at Canada Life Center?
I mean, lucky for Minnesota fans down here just south of you guys, Minnesota the Wild have found their groove at the right time of the year. It's been up and down, a roller coaster of a season for the Wild. It looked very much like they were going to be a bubble playoff team, if at all, but they have found a spot right now, second in the Central, as you guys are aware. The biggest difference is Minnesota had to refine its identity. You go back to last year, and the Wild were this high-octane scoring machine, putting up 4, 5, 6 goals, and doing so in dramatic fashion, pulling the goalie with 10 minutes left and going and come from behind, all of the exciting things. This team is not that team. You're not getting the same production from players like Marcus Foligno, Joel Eriksson, even Matt Boldy, who's been struggling as of late a little bit to find the back of the net. So Minnesota resorted to what it's always known throughout its franchise history, defense first mentality, and that stinginess has come to pay off in addition to some fantastic goaltending, namely from Philip Gustafsson, who has come out of nowhere and just flashed brilliance upon brilliance each and every night for Minnesota. So I think that's been the biggest. Again, they're winning games by 1 goal, maybe 2 goals. It's not been this big scoring deficit. It's not going to be the maybe 6-1 game Winnipeg saw earlier, but they are going to make it very tough on their opponents, and tonight that would be the Jets.
Well, it's funny you say that because I think that's what's freaking people out even more. I mean, the Wild handed the Jets their ass earlier this season with that 6-1 win, another 4-1 win, and that was the best version of the Winnipeg Jets, which has been not that present as of late, although maybe hoping that the Wild can bring the best out of the Jets right now in a big rivalry game, remembering what happened a little earlier this year. But you mentioned Gustafsson, and I wanted to ask you about Bill Guerin and the job that he's doing right now as the general manager. I remember Cam Talbot wasn't very happy, and I mean, he did everything short of driving his ass to the airport to get him out right away. You make that trade, you get some cap space, you get Gustafsson, and he has turned into one of the great stories of the year when it comes to the goaltending position. But it just does seem to be sort of a calling card of Bill Guerin that you're either in or you're out. And he's made some very hard decisions. He's made them unequivocally quickly, and it seems to be going out in his favor. Leading into the deadline, that was the case. And then there was one team that made a bunch of significant adds very close to 2 p.m. last Friday, and it's Bill Guerin. Can you just, for people that haven't been paying attention to the Wild off the ice this year, talk about the impact their GM has made and the deals that he's made to kind of put them into the position right now that they're enjoying?
Bill Guerin unapologetically makes these moves and makes these decisions too. And that starts with the buyouts of Zach Parise and Ryan Suter, which everybody knew was going to pinch the wallet naturally of the salary capped Minnesota Wild, who don't have that much money to play with. They had to part ways with some of their best players like Kevin Fiala and really have to make a lot of difficult decisions when it comes to contracts. Matt Dumba is on an expiring contract right now, a longtime defenseman for your Minnesota Wild. Odds are he will not be here at the end of the year, but cutting those, making that decision to cut Parise and Suter, I think, was for the best of the organization, best of the team, because as you've seen, they've really gelled together in a very different way than they had under Parise and Suter. It just is a different vibe in general. And the saying here in the Twin Cities is, in Billy G we trust, because every move that he's made, no matter how highly you questioned it, it's panned out. You go back to the Cam Talbot, Philip Gustafson trade, and a lot of people were very high on Talbot heading into the offseason. He had a pretty decent year last year. Obviously, questionable decisions made during the playoffs with Marc-Andre Fleury, but Bill Guerin made the swap. Although I will say, I don't think even Billy G knew what he had with Philip Gustafson. I think that has shocked everybody. I don't think anybody saw his brilliance coming as it has. But even the moves that he made at deadline, adding Gustav Nyquist, who, yes, is hurt right now, but he got him for nothing, basically, whereas a healthy Nyquist probably would have been a bit more expensive. They moved some dead weight and some money with Jordan Greenway for a second-round pick in a fantastic draft year this year. So that is probably more than what Greener might have yielded in other years. And then adding Marcus Johansson, somebody who Minnesota Wild fans are familiar with. It's a second go-around. Johansson was hurt, already looking dividends better than what the first time around he was with the Wild. And then also you've got Oscar Sundqvist, who has now slotted in, kind of replaced Greenway with his size, and John Klingberg, which was that last minute one that came out of Anaheim. Again, all of those moves costing Bill Guerin nothing, just a few picks here and there, and still not mortgaging the future at all either. And I think that's what has made Bill Guerin so successful, is he's very high on his prospects, on keeping the players within him, knowing that it's going to be a little bit tough for the next few years as they're so strapped with cash. But I think he's done a great job. And the great thing about these additions are they're all UFAs. So he's not on the hook for any of them come the end of the year. If they play great, they play great. You can discuss it then. But for right now, it's just a little bit of added offensive punch from everybody, including Klingberg.
Hey, refresh my memory. What was the Klingberg cost? It was a fourth-round pick?
A fourth-round pick, which I believe was something that probably came in a roundabout trade because they did 2 3-team trades earlier this year too. So I feel like it was something that was just nothing.
Well, and I'll tell you what.
And it was, they did get rid of 2 AHL players, Nestorenko, who's also at BC, but they weren't intending to sign him anyway, so...
Yeah, I mean, not a lot lost from it. And I mean, you cover the National Hockey League more than just the Wild. I mean, we did an extended show. We went about 4.5 hours on deadline day, and we were talking about, obviously, what the Jets were doing. We had everything around. And I remember seeing the return for Klingberg, and then remember what they got from Buffalo for Jordan Greenway and his 2 goals and 7 points on the season. And if anything, I took it as, first of all, some shrewd dealing by Bill Guerin, but also how much size, toughness is valued at this time of the year. And I think that, having already acquired Ryan Reeves, they were in a position where a player like that was expendable. And man, did they get the right side of that one.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's a good deal for Jordan Greenway, too. Another player that came up through the Minnesota Wild prospect. He was drafted by the Wild, but he needed a change of scenery. Things which just were not clicking for Greenway here at all. Obviously, he started late, missed all of training camp with an injury. Then his first game back gets injured again in a separate injury. And that one was a shoulder, which I think changed the way he played. I think he was afraid to use that size, that frame, that body a little bit, because you saw a lot of hesitance from Greenway when it comes to battles along the boards or getting down in the greasy goal areas like he was known for. But he's familiar with Granato out in Buffalo, having spent time with him at the NTDP. So I think Bill Guerin did consider that too. And Billy always tells us, I don't want to win a trade. I want it to be a good trade. And I think while it's very arguably probably a little bit better for the Wild, I do think that it's a good deal for Buffalo too, who could use Greenway side. But yeah, I think getting a second round for that was not anything anybody saw coming.
Well, and a fifth rounder. And of course, they were creative earlier on using their limited cap space to broker a couple deals and essentially pay like $75,000 for a fourth rounder and then use that for a couple of the other trades. Where does John Klingberg fit in? And you know what? I'll ask this question at the same time while asking about Brandon native Calen Addison, a young player who had been a big part of the power play at the time. Is his spot in the lineup maybe compromised by the addition of Klingberg, and in particular that Wild power play? How does it look now with Klingberg, a player that has been very successful with the man advantage over the course of his NHL career?
I mean, you nailed it. Once we discussed power play, we kind of saw the writing on the wall for Calen Addison, who was a healthy scratch for 4 straight games a little bit before that, too. The knock on Klingberg, obviously, is the defensive side of his game, which is never great when you're a defenseman. The good news is whenever Jonas Brodin finally comes back from this injury, I think pairing those two together will easily cover up the mistakes that Klingberg might make defensively, because Brodin is so good at that. Guerin had said the biggest thing that he wanted from Klingberg was that offensive production, was his ability to play up on the offensive side. Now, when it comes to Calen Addison, again, unfortunately, I think he's going to be the odd man out more often than not. Now, Calen, I think, to me, has a bright future, and I really want to see a little bit more with the Minnesota Wild, but I think they were just not impressed with the way that he was developing. Minnesota didn't seem to be liking the way that his lack of defensive game was coming along. They felt that he was too offensive at some times, which is why he took a seat on the pine. Again, I'm hoping that he still jumps into the rotation. I certainly think there are some other defensemen that the Wild have out there that could easily take a seat on any given night, but we'll have to see. I imagine Calen saw that writing as well. Again, Klingberg is a UFA, so that contract expires at the end of this year. So it's certainly not all doom and gloom for Mr. Addison, but it'll be interesting to see how the year end plays out here.
Just looking at the lines, it's sort of funny seeing Ryan Hartman, who you remember coming over from the Preds, being a first line center, not necessarily guys, but when you got Zuccarello riding shotgun on one side and Kirill Kaprizov on the other, you're probably counted on to do very different things. But tell us about that line, and in particular, Kaprizov, who continues to, grow into one of the true superstars in the National Hockey League.
Kirill Kaprizov just 1 goal shy of 40 for the second straight season. He'd be the first Wild player in franchise history to do back-to-back 40-goal seasons. I apologize if that happens tonight up in the peg, but no, I mean, Kirill Kaprizov is a superstar in every scheme of the word, but he's also a unique superstar to me, because he is that superstar that is not afraid to get in the dirty areas either. He's not just scoring these highlight reel goals. He is down getting rebounds, and he's down kind of in the areas in the paint that you don't see too often. And he's also willing to stand his ground and fight and battle, and he gets knocked around quite a bit, as sometimes superstars do, but he is unique in that aspect. Now you pair him with Zuccarello, who has this natural chemistry with him, where those two almost look for each other too much. It can be a little bit of a problem. Dean Evson had mentioned that oftentimes those two only have eyesight for each other, right? They're skating down the ice, and neither one of them might be looking to shoot first, which again is probably part of the offensive production problems Minnesota's facing now. Now, Ryan Hartman finally got slotted back up into that top line. Again, another player that had battled serious injury and then kind of was up and down. Hartman's role has changed a little bit from last year, as has the entire team, right? Again, Ryan Hartman, a 30-goal scorer last year, something that nobody could have predicted. Now this year, he seems to be trying to still find his game, trying to be that physical player that everybody has known him to be, but also he's taking some bad penalties in that process by being that gritty guy. So it's going to be interesting to see how that continues to play out, that dynamic. Again, it's better, but as we've all seen from the Minnesota Wild this year, it's hard to find a center that can play with two elite players like Kaprizov and Zuccarello, but for now, Hartman has been up for the task.
One of the other things, Jessi, that we've always known from the Minnesota Wild is that team is going to have some bite, and they're going to challenge you physically. And that challenge for opponents got increased exponentially when Ryan Reaves showed up in town. Was it a surprise because of the makeup of the team when they actually did go to get him? And tell us a little bit about his role right now in the team. I mean, he's probably never going to be more than a fourth-line player, but fourth lines have very different impacts on different teams.
I mean, you certainly saw the chippiness decrease when Ryan Reaves came to the Minnesota Wild. I mean, there certainly wasn't as much headhunting going on against Kaprizov, knowing that Revo was skating around out there. I think it was a surprise. I think everybody kind of looked at it as like a why. You have Marcus Foligno. At the time, you had Jordan Greenway, Ryan Hartman, plus Brandon Duhaime is another guy that is a fighter, tough guy. So, having Ryan Reaves was just like, well, what's he going to bring? I think what Bill Guerin was looking at, and something that he's always touted, is that culture in the locker room. Ryan Reaves is a fantastic human being and just so much fun. And at that time, when they went out and signed Ryan Reaves, Minnesota didn't have any energy. The team itself was just kind of humming along, and certainly losses will do that. But even when they won, it just, something felt off. Ryan Reaves injected that team with this new kind of energy that I think really uplifted a lot of the players' spirit. Obviously, he knows Marc-Andre Fleury and John Merrill from their time together in Vegas, so that certainly helped. So aside from just the little bit of on-ice presence that he brings, and he joked with us the other night when he scored his first goal of the year, saying that, well, yeah, I'm a 50-point producer. I'm sure they're happy I finally got going, right? I mean, it's that personality, and I think that truly is what excites the Minnesota Wild, and why they turned things around earlier on in the season, I think, is a big testament to Ryan Reaves and the move that Bill Guerin made.
Special guest star in on WST today from the Bar Down Buttes headquarters. Hey, just before we go, we talked about Gustafsson. Are we expecting Marc-Andre Fleury tonight? And maybe just quickly, how's his season gone while Gustafsson's been stealing the show?
I would expect Marc-Andre Fleury, again, not that Gus couldn't go back-to-back. You saw Jacob Markstrom go back-to-back and perform incredibly well for the Calgary Flames with Dallas and Minnesota. Marc-Andre Fleury has struggled a little bit. It's been a little bit up and down, a little bit more down as of late, but luckily Philip Gustafsson has certainly taken a hold of that crease, which is always nice. But he's still Marc-Andre Fleury. At the end of the day, he still is a future Hall of Famer, still a Stanley Cup winner, all of the accolades that everybody knows from the Flower. He has been letting Gus have the net without too much, there's no animosity there, which I think is what makes Marc-Andre Fleury so beloved, is that he's not sitting around. Of course, he'd love to play, but he understands that the betterment of the team is with Gus right now. Again, that being said, Marc-Andre Fleury has stepped in, won a couple games, and done fine. He's just definitely been more in the background than I think he has been used to in recent years. So it'll still be a good test. Again, the defense is the thing that Winnipeg is going to have to look out for tonight, but Fleury is a part of that as well.
I don't think we could have had a better little special guest appearance on International Women's Day, showing the job of women doing working and taking care of families than this. Jessi, you're such a pleasure to have on. Enjoy the game tonight. And just quickly before we go, fill people in on Bar Down Buttes and where they can read and find your work covering the Minnesota Wild in the NHL.
Yeah, thank you. No, you'll probably see this guy on a lot of Bar Down Buttes episodes too. I should not have put a sliding door in the office, guys. Recommendation number one for working moms and dads alike. But no, Bar Down Buttes, a hockey podcast releasing new episodes every single Monday. We had Minnesota legend Lou Nanne on this last week. Next week, we actually have Philip Gustafsson on as our guest to talk all things goaltending and Swedish. And then you can find all of my writing and work on NHL.com as well as Wild.com, where we've got a couple of player feature stories as well. So appreciate you guys having me on.
Oh, thanks so much for doing this. Let's do this again soon. All the best, and we'll get back to everything else on the plate. I know it's a busy grind, that's for sure. Jessi, thanks so much. Enjoyed this one tonight.
Thanks, guys. Yep. Bye-bye.
Oh, that was phenomenal. Jessi Pierce of NHL.com. And folks, if you haven't checked it out, just some great work talking NHL. Just really, really fun over at the Bar Down Buttes. All right. I guess I haven't mentioned this yet. I know some people are in on some days and out on others. Before we get Remo back in here, folks, in the chat, I have just plopped in the event link for tickets for our Winnipeg Sports Talk Sports Trivia Night. episode number 2. The first one was full. We had such a great time with so many of you out there. Hopefully we'll see you all back again at Little Brown Jug 3 weeks today, Wednesday, March 29th. We'll have a few pints, ask a whole bunch of questions. The curation of the questions continues. A lot of work putting this together, but it's a hell of a lot of fun. We hope we'll see you there. Ticket link in the description, and Remis has pinned it right up. And if you're listening to us afterwards, you can also go into the description of the video or our social media channels and make sure you get in, count yourself in, and we'll see you there 3 weeks today at Little Brown Jug on William Avenue, 7 p.m. for Winnipeg Sports Talk Sports Trivia event number 2. Of course, while you're at it, you can pick up the great taste of Little Brown Jug wherever they sell great beer, Manitoba liquor marts and beer stores around the city. And let's get Remo in for this one, because we do have to give a big thank you, certainly for their incredible support for the last 2 years, getting in with us before we had even done episode 1, now on 502. But the Nick and Nikki DQ group, such great friends of ours and great supporters of ours, believed in this concept from the get-go. And Remo, we do have a nice gift from Nick and Nikki for the 2nd anniversary that I know you've got a little pic to show off to everybody.
There it is, the official Winnipeg Sports Talk anniversary cake. Hustler. Looks delicious. Really well done. 2 shades of blue. I think that's polar night blue. Isn't that what the Jets blue is officially?
Aviator. Aviator blue and a polar blue.
Aviator. We got so that's on the cake there. I just taste. It's also got the Winnipeg Sports Talk logo for people listening on the podcast. But yeah, great looking cake. I'm looking forward to getting into this one. Shout out to Nick for his support and setting this up. I mean, made some great cakes for my birthday, my son's birthday. Did a great dinosaur cake. So exciting stuff here from DQ.
Well, and it looks great. Tastes even better. They got the traditional DQ ice cream cakes and blizzard cakes as well. So it's a perfect example of what Nick and Nikki can do for you. If you've got a big event or a birthday coming up, you can hit them up on Instagram at DQ Manitoba. I'll get your order in, get that logo or whatever you want to put on it, and then get it ready for a quick and easy pickup at any of the 4 Nick and Nikki DQs. DQ Niverville, DQ Northgate, DQ Polo Park, and over at DQ St. Anne's. You know, I had to laugh there. I mean, it's such a great segment with Jessi on all things Minnesota Wild heading into this game tonight. And as we mentioned, you know, the moms and the women in our lives that do so many things, taking care of children and working. That was maybe the ultimate scene for a day like today with Jessi and someone popping in. I'm sure your better half has been in the middle of things and has had some attention challenges with somebody else knocking on the door. I don't mean Evan, I'm meaning you.
Yes. Yeah. So Jessi, I know people on the podcast probably wouldn't even know that her son was there. I don't know. I'm getting better at estimating kids' ages. I don't know. He's 3, 4, I don't know, 2, somewhere in that range, toddler, but, you know, tapping her on the back shoulder, mom, and she didn't miss a beat at all. So it was a fun visual here for us on YouTube. People on the podcast, you probably won't even notice. You might have heard it picking up from her microphone when he grabbed it away from her, but it was a highlight. Doing a great job there. And yeah, shout out to my wife on International Women's Day. I have a newborn daughter as well, and mom, and all the women in our lives, you know, mother-in-law. So it's great day to celebrate. Well, I know there's something they're doing at the Jets game tonight as well for that, I believe.
Oh, good stuff. Well, and you know what? For me, I mean, obviously my mom and all the moms out there and the women, but a special shout out to all the women of Winnipeg Sports Talk that support us so well and are here in and all the time. And by the way, Nick's in here. Nick, thanks again, buddy, for everything. And Nick says, congrats, boys. And a nice little comment from Kyle. I went to DQ Niverville, beauty of a place, awesome staff. And you can pretty much count on that at any of the 4 Nick and Nikki DQs. All right. Before we get to get out and get this podcast loaded up, let's get over to the Coolbet lines for today. Quick note, new lock shop today. And for you golf guys and girls like myself, Players Championship begins tomorrow. Not quite a major, but feels quite like it. Tons of markets that maybe we don't get for regular PGA Tour events up on Coolbet. And if you do want to get to our picks, a few exotics, some outright winners. We're going to have a Make the Cut parlay coming up on the Coolbet exclusive section as well. It's all there at the Lock Shop Bets on YouTube. If you, I won't put the link in right now because I don't have it handy, but search Lock Shop Bets, subscribe to the podcast there. Latest episode of the Players Championship. All there for you to get ready for tee off tomorrow. As far as tonight goes, pretty slow night in the National Hockey League. 3 games. And, I just realized this Jets game starts at 6:30 again tonight. I guess that is a Sportsnet game. So
Yes.
Govern yourselves accordingly. I'm glad we did the Coolbet lines because I just realized that right now. Starts off with Chicago and Detroit. 2 teams. Detroit had a sniff there. It doesn't look like they're going to be in the mix, though. Detroit minus 229 against the Blackhawks, plus 190. The Jets are favored tonight. Probably partially because of the Minnesota Wild playing last night and having to travel. But the Jets are a slight favorite, minus 142 at home against the Wild. Wild plus 120. No surprise with how stingy the Wild have been defensively as of late, that the total on this game is 5.5. And the Jets plus 185 if you think they can win by 2. I did pop in a Lock Shop Partner Parlay exclusive for tonight. And I didn't want to mush the team. It seems like anytime I put something together that involves the Jets win, it doesn't happen. So tonight, we simply went with the under 5.5, Nito Niederreiter's score, and Josh Morrissey to get a point. Massive number, plus 1,300. So 13-1 on that if you want to ride with me in the exclusives. And as far as the curling goes tonight, what a matchup for all the marbles. And it's Matt Dunstone that's the favorite against Kevin Cooey. Both of these teams are 6-0. The winner will get to 7-0 and clinch the group. Manitoba minus 139. Alberta plus 108. If you haven't played a Coolbet before, use the promo code WST for a 100% deposit on a bonus on your first deposit up to $200. Sounds like it's going to be all eyes on Winnipeg and the Jets tonight, Remo, on national TV. Hopefully the fellas are ready.
Great. Yeah, I'm sure they saved all the features as they were planning for last game for this one because I guess it's Jets and Wild, 6:30. I'm sure we'll get tons of Rennie on the broadcast, which is the best part of when Sportsnet airs the games. And yeah, Vancouver, Anaheim, the late one. Not really looking forward to that. Chicago, Detroit again. So the only game really meaning stuff in the standing. Unless you're counting tanking for retired. Although Detroit is still they're in the fringe. So a couple of games. Well, we did have a number of games last night, which is why, and I don't know if you saw, we did have a bit of a suspension announcement come out during the show.
Let me guess who it was. It's got to be Tony DeAngelo, right?
Yes, it is. Yes. Okay. Do you want to guess this? You can guess.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's the suspension.
Okay.
Tony.
And do you want to tell everyone what he did?
Oh yeah. First of all, if you missed this last night, there was a big scrum between the Flyers and Tampa Bay Lightning, and Tony DeAngelo skated from outside of the picture into the scrum. If anyone remembers the old video game Joust, essentially using his stick as a jousting pole straight into Corey Perry's nuts. Now, I'll say this. If he was going to do this to anyone in the league, he's probably going to get the most sympathy for doing it to Corey Perry, who has speared more than his fair share of opponents in the NHL. But when it comes to spearing, this one was over the top, a bit of a running start and directly right into the junk. I had no doubt that he was going to get a call from NHL player safety. And I'm going to predict, Remis, that he got, since he's been suspended before, I'm going to go with 5 games.
You would be way over, Hustler, for 5 games. He got 2 games for spearing Corey Perry. Spearing Corey Perry in the net, 2 games. So that's what it is.
Okay, he got 3 off because it was Corey Perry.
Well, that's what people
got
were
a
saying.
discount.
That was a tweet. There's a tweet here. I want to give the guy credit. A.T. Foolman says, it's good that someone speared Corey Perry in the nuts, but it's also good that D'Angelo's getting suspended. So it's working out for the best.
A win-win for everyone. Yeah, 2 of the most hated guys in the league going at it. But it was over the top. And there was another stick-swinging incident last night that you were talking about earlier.
Well, I'm watching from Minnesota. Ryan Hartman, it looks like after play, goes up to Rasmus Andersson, the Flames defenseman, and just axe chops his arm. I thought he could have broken his wrist pretty easily, and I thought it was a pretty dirty play. I haven't seen any discipline, but amazing that you can just go up to a guy, unsuspecting player, in the middle of, after a whistle, just two-hand him in the arm, and nothing's gonna happen to you. That's why we love hockey, right, Huss? Isn't that why? Isn't that why we're all here? We love, as much as I'm what a dirty play. This is why you tune in. You love the violence aspect, right?
Roy Mack in chat. It was 5, and then they said, "Oh, it was Perry. That'll be 2. That'll be 2 games." They had to give a suspension out at some point, and yes, I see all of your jokes about 1 game per nut, etc., etc. That being said, folks, this has been a real fun show today. And obviously, just from both myself and Michael, once again, if you missed earlier on today, 2nd anniversary Winnipeg Sports Talk. Hard to believe that we were freaking out trying to get on the air for our first show 2 years today. I'll never forget those 3 weeks as we put this all together. And Remo went to the University of YouTube to figure out how this all works. And to think that we're sitting here today with such great support from our sponsors and all of you is really special. And we just did, again, want to thank everybody for the support, whether you're a podcast listener, whether YouTube jump in, whether you're watching the YouTube after the fact. As we say, hit that red subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, tell your friends on social media if you can about Winnipeg Sports Talk, and let people know where we're at. We seem to continue to grow, and we certainly continue to have a hell of a great time each and every day. I often say that, shutting the station down sucked for the city, it sucked for sports fans overall, and it really sucked for everyone that lost jobs. And many of our great friends back at the station are doing other things. But certainly, selfishly for the 2 of us, we wouldn't have it any other way. This has ended up being the best thing that I think ever happened to us, and we're appreciative each and every day for the opportunity to be able to do this, to have it work out the way that it has. And win or lose tonight, we'll be back here tomorrow at 1 p.m., and we'll be there through the playoffs and through Bomber season. And Remo, congrats to you for all the work you've done, and here's to many more cheersing on March 8th for another year of Winnipeg Sports Talk.
Yeah, well, I'll say cheers to you for when they had the news, I figured I was no longer going to be working in sports media. I thought I was done and yada, yada, yada. You could have said, no, let's keep going. And I wouldn't have done it if you weren't able to get the initial sponsors. And I actually thought, I'll do this part-time and I'll look for a real job. And here we are 2 years later. Still going. So this has been...
I worked hard to try to find someone more committed, but it didn't work out. So you know what? I talked to you then. No, just kidding.
I don't blame you. I was like, yeah, Leah, I told my wife, I'm just going to do this, get some money, I'm still getting paid a bit, for as buyout. So we'll just do this.
You were the one with a wife and a young kid. I mean, the stress was more. My biggest stress was making sure it worked for you, because I knew the stress that you would have been having on you. But I mean, many of you know, I did a bunch of work, and I got a call the next day from a station in Calgary to get out there. And I needed a bit of time to think about it. And to be honest, I went back and there's too big of an opportunity here for something like this to not give it a run. And I'm very, very happy that we did. The rest has been history. It's been a great 2 years, and here is to many more. And all I want for our Winnipeg Sports Talk birthday is 2 damn points in the standings tonight. so we can be talking about a win tomorrow and maybe a little bit of a better forecast for the Winnipeg Jets as they head out on the road to the Sunshine State. Florida Saturday, Tampa Sunday, Carolina next Tuesday, and then a big one against the beasts of the National Hockey League, the Boston Bruins, coming up on Thursday. But we'll talk about those games in the next couple days. Tonight, it is all about the Jets and Wild. Just realizing, as I mentioned, that's a 6:30 game tonight. It is on Sportsnet. I'll be up in the upper bowl. If you're around 316, pop in and say hi. Otherwise, we'll get back together with the whole gang live on YouTube at 1 o'clock p.m. on tomorrow's edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Great show lined up. Our guy, Sean Reynolds, will come on the program, Rawicki, and we'll also be talking to top 5 NHL draft prospect, second in WHL scoring, and one of the stars of the Winnipeg Ice, Zach Benson, making his first appearance on Winnipeg Sports Talk. So all that's coming up tomorrow. Do not miss it. In the meantime, tell a friend about WST. Thank you for all the support. Enjoy the game tonight. We'll see you tomorrow right here, 1 p.m. on YouTube on WST.
Oh, my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.